All right, guys, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about infantry. Honestly, I made the Cav one just because I noticed that was a topic of conversation. It's something that I had brought up before, but I never really thought too deeply about it. So I decided to make a video, and then in the comments, a lot of people were asking about infantry, which I thought was pretty clear cut. But since, a couple of people brought it up, we'll make an infantry one. So before we start, just like with the last few videos I put out, I want to talk about a couple concepts because that's going to tie into some of the thought process with infantry. Okay, so the first one is the idea of a cost versus benefit, right? You guys probably have heard of a cost benefit analysis. I don't want to mansplain it to you, but I'll do it, right? There's a cost for something. In this case, it's either going to be gold heads or money, right? Because we're buying dailies versus the benefit. Okay, and benefit in this case is commanders. Now, for Rise of Kingdoms, unless you're like brand new to say like season 3, or you're just brand new, usually the benefit isn't, oh, just how good is this commander. It's how good this commander is over the commander you're replacing. So, for example, Gorgo is probably better than Alex, right? So probably it's pretty clear she is. But how much better is she? And then how much better is Gorgo than Alex to make her worth spending another 700 gold heads? And one, win MGE and then spend 700 gold heads, right? So a lot of the times when I make a recommendation, it's not that this commander isn't better than another. It's just all the other factors that go into it. Is a cost benefit analysis actually worth it? Okay. The second concept is a minimum threshold of usability. I kind of made it up. I tried to look it up on Google to see what the actual phrase or term is for that. Minimum threshold of usability. At least it captures the idea I'm trying to present. So it's, in this case, it's think damage, tankiness, defense, march speed. There's always going to be a minimum where if you're below that, that commander is not usable. So you can imagine, you could have an ultra, the highest DPS march in the game, right? But if after 2 hits, that march sad faces, it doesn't matter how fast that march is and how much DPS that, or there is actually a, because if you could one hit someone and sad face them, it's probably worth it, right? But at some point, the threshold, you cross below the threshold where that march isn't usable. One of the reasons why Martel is not really viable in the end game is because his DPS or his damage output is too low, right? Because he has march speed, he has a bunch of stats, but he doesn't have an active skill and he doesn't have a natural pairing that boosts the damage enough where that march is actually viable and worth it on the field. And just a note on minimum threshold of usability, it's not actually a set number. It actually also depends on the current situation or the current meta, right? So like a march like Guan and Leonidas was probably viable back in the day when there was less march speed in the meta. But now in the meta, there's so much more march speed. That march is so slow, even if you boosted its output by probably like 20 or 30%, I'm not sure it would be usable. And this idea of a minimum threshold of usability applies to, for me specifically, to marches that are very, very squishy and the marches that are very, very slow. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Right now, there's a artificial line, even more artificial line or threshold. I like to call it the minimum threshold of fun, right? So let's just take march speed, for example. Guan, Scipio, T5 without the 10% march speed boost from the 4-piece Eternal Empire set is my minimum threshold of fun. Any march slower than that, it's noticeable to me that it's slow, and I almost have this like slight hesitation to use it, right? So Herman and ZL, without doing anything else, is below that threshold. And even though that is a really good march, I have it in like my top tier march, like Herman, ZL, and then Scipio, Lucia are probably the 2 best marches in the game, right? But because Herman ZO is below that threshold without doing anything else to it, I almost have a hesitation. I don't enjoy using it as much. The trades are good, right? It, like on paper, I know the utility, it does all these things, but because it's slower, it's just not as fun for me. So a lot of times, I think it's important to realize we play this game for fun, right? And if you're not having fun doing a part of it, even if it's like the better play, the better move, I would honestly probably choose something that's a little bit not as good, but more fun and more enjoyable and go with that. Just because, I play this game because it brings me entertainment and joy. And I will actually want to have fun using the marches, not just because something looks good on paper, but it's not that fun. Next is the idea of a shelf life, right? So it's not just this cycle, it's what about the upcoming cycle? So like, for example, Gorgo, really, really good with Luchet. Slow, really slow, but good with Luchet. But Gorgo only pairs well with Luchet. So if in the next infantry cycle, we get a Smite commander that is better for the open field and pairs better with Luchet than Gorgo, all of a sudden Gorgo's done, right? You could still use her for Garrison, but by then Garrisons fall out of the meta so fast, she probably wouldn't even be meta for the Garrison, right? So that shelf life is really low. So even though there's a commander that could be really good now, if you're considering the shelf life, all of a sudden that factors into that cost benefit analysis, may or may not be worth it. And then finally is the idea of synergy, right? You could actually look at a commander and see how synergistic they are potentially with future commanders. For example, Luchet's expertise, probably the best expertise in the game, but every single time he launches a basic attack, there's a 25% chance to launch another basic attack. There are so many things in the game that scales off of how many attacks you launch, right? For example, you get more rage when you launch more basic attacks. When you have an instant proc like Alex, in 10 turns, if you have a 10% chance to launch an instant proc, that's a 65% chance to launch at least one instant proc in 10 turns. But if you say push that basic attack, that usually you get 10 basic attacks in 10 turns, and you could push it up to 13 because Luchet about half the time will actually launch 3 extra basic attacks in a 10-turn interval. So you're launching 13. If you're doing the chances of Alex launching a instant proc in 13 turns, that number goes from 65% to close to 75%, right? So that's synergy there. Another one would be like, if you look at Scipio's expertise, rage grows 30% faster when the target is silenced, right? So if he's behind Guan, the target, unless it's like a Boudica or something, is always going to be silenced, or at least there's a high chance it's going to be silenced. There's synergy there. So a lot of times when you're looking at commanders, it's how synergistic could they be with future commanders. So that's the end of the concepts, right? But I wanted to bring this up because when I bring these concepts up later, it will make a lot more sense why I have the thought process I do and why I give the strategy I give. So let's actually talk about these commanders. So first, let's talk about Luchet. Right, in my opinion, the best commander of the game. You pair him with Scipio, best march in the game. You pair him with Gorgo, arguably, at least as far as trades, best march in the game. You pair Alex behind him, is really, really good. A tier 1 march. I would actually put it on the level of Nevsky Joan. Probably a little worse, but on that level. You know, blasphemy, I know. But it's really good. And what's the common denominator? It's Luchet, right? He's literally like the perfect commander. He has AoE, he has march speed. The only thing he maybe is lacking a little bit is utility as far as like buff debuffs. But even then, he's doing a 5 target AoE 40% slow, which is actually still very powerful in its own right. Just best commander of the game. Now, Scipio, in my opinion, is probably the 3rd best commander of the game. I think Herman is 2nd, just because his poison is so powerful, and he also does a 3 target AoE, and his expertise is like a light version of what Joan does, right? But like Herman's really good. But Scipio is like, if you make a case for any other commander to be 3rd best, besides Herman and Luchet, I would probably dig my heels in and argue with you, and I think I would be right. So even though Scipio doesn't necessarily have the best synergy with Luchet, you slap them together, you get the best march in the game, right? It's actually a really cool time to be an infantry simp, if you will. I think most players, I think that's probably well, actually, there's a lot of calf simps now, but I think most players, because when you first start out, the obvious route is go infantry. A lot of players have a soft spot for infantry, and it's actually a very fun time to have 2 infantry marches right now, because you could actually put out some really good marches. And up until the point where Luchet came out, that just was not the case, right? You have Guan, Scipio, and then whatever you had as a second march was just a huge step down. Whereas now you could actually put out 2 very good infantry marches. And a lot of the reason why is because you have the best and the 3rd best commander of the game, in my opinion, that are both infantry. Now, Guan and Gorgo, are in the top 4 in my opinion, but they're a little bit risky, right? I made a video about this. My last KVK, probably my biggest regret is that I didn't actually find a right home for Guan until the very end. I tried running Guan with Mehmed. I tried running him with Martel. Tried running him with Alex. I don't have Sargon, but I know people that run him with Sargon didn't like it. It's almost like if you didn't pair him with Scipio, it was just mid at best, and he just kind of falling out. But when you pair him with Scipio, that March is really fun to use and really good. It's not necessarily the best at dueling, right? I think like it kind of got a bad rap because whenever you put that March against any other March in dueling, it would seem to not do as well. But if you bring him out in the field and then you look at the reports, Guan Scipio would do really good, right? Now, I think Guan actually most likely will make the cut when the next infantry comes out, just because he has some march speed. He still provides a very useful utility, silence. 3-target 2000 AoE is still pretty good. If you get another commander that comes out that does pretty good skill damage, that's better than Sargon, which is most likely, you could probably just pair that commander with Guan, and then you could go move Scipio with Luchet. If it's a smite commander, you could keep Guan with Scipio, and the smite commander will go with Luchet. Like Guan actually, even though he's getting older, is actually a lot safer than I think people think, even though he's old, just because the most natural one to be replaced will be the 4th one, which right now is Gorgo or Alex or Sargon or whoever you're using, right? So let's talk about Gorgo a little bit. Gorgo is really good with Luchet. I actually think I almost always trade negative. So if someone is bringing Gorgo out on the field and I look at the reports, I almost always trade negative. Her biggest downside, in my opinion, is there's 0 march speed, and it's very noticeable. Gorgo's little like figurine on the screen is very noticeable, so you can see when someone has a Gorgo easily when they're trying to march away, and even like on the screen, just like, man, that march is so slow, right? Because if it's Gorgo or Luchet, that thing only has 20% march speed. That's it, right? And her expertise is probably really good for garrison, but it only really triggers, well, not only really, it only triggers when you're below 50%. And when you're below 50%, your effectiveness is already like severely dwindled. So even though that expertise is kind of cool, I don't like it as much as what it provides, because it's only triggering when you're already at a huge disadvantage. Another debuff she has is, I think her 2nd or 3rd skill, like 10% of the time when she hits someone, that march could take up to like 30 or 40, I think like 30% extra normal damage, which also scales with smite damage. That's really good. She's really good, but her biggest problem is she has no march speed. And I think as the game moves on, she doesn't have a lot of shelf life, just because, one, the garrison and rally meta, you know, like every cycle, at most every 2 cycles, the meta garrison or rally leader changes and gets power equipped out, and then she only pairs well with Luchet. So even though she's really good, if you have her, use her with Luchet, but to invest in her just to form a 1st or 2nd infantry march, the cost benefit analysis to me is just not worth it. So strategy, how should you go about this? Okay. So for me, right now it's February 16th, so mid-February 2024. Up until the calves are released, maybe up until like a month before the calves are released, and we'll actually get a clearer picture and date when we get closer. I think you should go for infantry first. One, because it's most likely you already have gear for infantry coming out of KVK 1 and 2. But 2, it's actually the easiest to transition to. You can actually start working on Alex a little bit earlier if you're a spender. It's actually just a very natural fit. Whereas if you get into Cav right now, I just talked about Cavs, who are you going to invest in, right? Like you literally have this impending or upcoming Cav cycle that we have no idea what's going to happen. It's actually a little bit risky to put your gold heads or even money into Cavs right now without knowing what's going to happen. So I think from like now until at least April, late April, maybe early May, I think, even though you might have to wait a little, I don't know the cycle, like which wheel comes for like KVK 3, I think it's worth it to wait for infantry. And the reason why you don't go for archer is just because there's no real usable archer that's worth investing in. And before KVK3. So you probably won't have the gear, and then it's just like a bigger jump. Whereas like if you already are using infantry and then you already have the gear, it's just an easier transition. If you are a mid spender or higher, in this case you're buying dailies like every day, or at least you can buy dailies every day. I actually think right now it's worth it to, as soon as Alex is available, start getting Alex in the wheel. And Alex's value really comes when you expertise them. So you expertise Alex and then you start working on Guan, right? Because now you can actually invest in 2 infantry commanders that are part of the meta pairing or close to the meta pairing that you don't have to spend any gold heads on. And then as soon as KVK3 comes around, depending on whether you're getting Alex or Guan, or if you're not a spender or a low spender and you're not doing the dailies, then you go for LC first, right? If you have 1 March, you just go for max Luce, and you pair that with Alex, right? Or you can actually go for LC 5511, and then Scipio, you want to get them to 5551 just because you actually get health on the 3rd skill. It's very, very important. And then you go back and max LC, and then you go back and max Scipio for that 1 March. Okay. Right, like, and the reason why I'm not giving you a clear picture is because depending on whether you're free to play, low spend, mid spend, or like a big spender, you're going to be, this order is going to change a little bit. But regardless, you want to go for LC first, at least to 5511. And then I think once you get there, it'll be more obvious what you should do next, right? Because if you're getting Alex and Guan in the dailies, and then you're actually working on Scipio and LC, even if they're not max, especially Scipio. Scipio, if you're pairing him with LC, like half his expertise isn't even that useful. His 4th skill is really good, so he's still worth expertising. But you could run an LC max with a Scipio 5551, and that would be a really good march. It would honestly still probably be better than any other march on the field besides Herman ZL and a max Scipio LC, right? So there's a lot of flexibility there. It's a really good time to be an infantry player right now, and that's actually the strategy I would give. So wait for infantry if you can, buy dailies in Alex and Guan, right? Alex was dead before, all of a sudden he's been revived with Luce, and because we won't see infantry for probably another 7 months, 6-7 months, right now you can actually invest in them and enjoy it, and then you just work on LC and Scipio. So if you guys watch all the way to the end, hopefully you guys enjoy this. You got some value. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe, because that actually makes a big difference. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers right now. Please like the video, comment. That actually helps with the algorithm. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave it. I'm pretty good at responding for now. I think if the traffic gets too high, although it'll be hard, but for now, I could at least look at every single comment and decide whether I want to respond to it. And again, thank you guys for watching. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you guys next time.